Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our third episode of Ambition Talks Tax Careers, where we'll be talking about mastering the tax director interview. I'm Claire, and I have my colleague here, Chris, joining us again.
Hi everyone.
We also have another colleague in our team, a tax team called Tasnima, which you can see on the screen, who covers VAT and direct tax as well as private client tax roles. I'm excited to guide you through what it will really take to succeed in a tax director interview within practice, including the Big Four, top tier mid-market practices, as well as boutique accountancy practices. Now, Chris has a series of questions that he will be asking me, which we will typically get from candidates going through the director interview process. Chris also covers director roles within transfer pricing, so he'll be able to give us some insight from his end and share some tips as well. So in the session, we will aim to offer some practical insight, firm-specific guidance, as well as strategies that you can use in your next tax director interview. So moving on to the agenda. Now, let's take a look at what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. So firstly, we're going to go through the different interview stages and how it can actually differ across firms. We'll look into how to best prepare for each stage of the interview. We'll also go into the different key stakeholders that you'll meet as well. We'll discuss sort of the time frame and duration and what to expect on that front. We'll also go through some of the common challenges and how to overcome them. We'll also I've got 3 examples to share of tax director interview processes that I've taken my candidates through, just to give you some better insight. And we'll finish up with the Q&A session. So let's dive in.
Great. So in this first section, we're going to run through the typical interview structure at director level. So Claire, what are some of the typical number of interview stages that you get for tax director candidates?
Sure. So for tax director roles, especially at the Big Four and top 10, you should expect around 4 to 5 stages, typically across the period of about 6 to 8 weeks. Mid-tier firms will follow a similar structure, but sometimes with slightly fewer steps. So in terms of a typical process and what it might look like, we'll start with initial screening. This will usually be with us, your recruitment consultant, the assumption that you are going to be working with a recruiter. You'll then start the formal interview process with a technical interview usually, and that will be conducted with by 2 tax partners, or they may choose to bring in a tax partner as well as a senior director. And then it will be the panel interview where you'll be meeting with other partners in the team, senior directors, as well as certain HR stakeholders. And then you come to presenting your business plan and be able to showcase the strategy that you intend to implement upon taking up this role. And you'll finish up with the final interview. And this tends to be conducted by the managing partner or someone from the leadership team alongside another partner that you may have already met earlier in the process. And the focus really there is about the cultural alignment and gives you opportunity to ask sort of more the bigger picture questions around the firm's overall strategy, growth plans, as well as any upcoming, for the upcoming years. And then we will have the offer stage and all, which comes after the interview process. So as you can see, it's quite structured, many layers of the process as well, but it will cover everything from your technical knowledge all the way through to your commercial acumen, as well as, your leadership presence as well.
Yeah, of course. And I think every firm obviously has its different processes with interviewing, but that leads us nicely onto our next section. So how would you categorize the differences in interview processes across all these various firms within the accounting industry?
Well, the basic stages of an interview process, such as the initial screening, the technical assessments, and the final interviews, they tend to be generally consistent firm to firm. However, each practice will tailor these stages so they're aligned with their own unique cultures, their values, as well as their needs. So, for instance, some practices may place a stronger emphasis on behavioral interviews just to be able to assess your cultural fit, while others might prioritize technical skills through quite rigorous case studies. Additionally, the format and the length of the interviews can vary significantly. So some firms may conduct multiple rounds of interviews over several weeks, whilst others might prefer a slightly more streamlined process with fewer stages. And also the involvement of different stakeholders such as HR, the managing partners, this can differ from firm to firm. And it will actually have an overall influence on your experience as well and impact. So I think understanding these nuances can help you be better prepared and be able to tailor your approach to each firm's specific interview process. And so that's where we really come to play and become a value add to the interview prep stage. Chris and I spend a huge amount of time preparing our candidates ahead of any interview they have, each and every interview, I'd say. And also, given the fact that each firm's interview process and approach is quite unique to the firm itself, we ensure that we tailor our prep also our candidates in accordance to what we know the firm is looking for, who's going to be in the interview, and what stage of the interview process it is. So just in general, the Big Four tend to be a bit more, formal. There's usually more rigorous leadership assessments and presentation scoring cards that are used as well. The behavioral interviews are competency-based, using a range of scenarios as well. And I found that there tends to be a stronger emphasis on collaboration, really deep diving into and understanding your people development skills, as well as ensuring that your focus is on delivery excellence as well. Whereas the mid-tiers, I find that their interviews are a bit more commercially oriented and team leadership focused as well. They really will scrutinize your client strategy and ask you a lot of questions that make you doubt yourself sometimes in the interview as well. Whilst the boutique practices, their processes tend to be leaner. You may, however, end up meeting the same people that you've met multiple times, and the focus on with those type of practices is really understanding your entrepreneurial mindset and ensuring that you have a really solid grasp and knowledge of your local market as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good insight. And like Claire mentioned, each firm is very different when it comes to the interview processes, which is obviously where we come in to help you guys through these processes. Like, we're always there to help you and guide you and have an understanding of what each team is actually looking for. So that's how we're best helped to prepare you. So please do utilize us. And it's really important to use us. Yeah. So moving on to the next question, each interview stage will hold its own individual purpose and will differ. So what would you say are some effective strategies for preparing for each stage of the interview process?
Sure. Really, really good question, Chris. So let me break it down stage by stage. So let's start with the initial screening. As mentioned, this will tend to sit with us as your recruitment consultant on the assumption you are using a recruiter. So what we want to know is really, what's your story? What's motivating your decision to move, or what will motivate you to move, given the fact that we are dealing with a lot of passive candidates nowadays. What are your career aspirations? What gets you out of bed each day? So those are really important things to start thinking about, I would say, before you even respond to a message or before you even start working your CV. Now, the next thing I wanted to kind of cover quickly is around the screening pieces. On the package expectation side of things. So some of our candidates actually aren't comfortable about talking about money. It's fine, we get it, but I just want to stress how important it is. From the get-go, I think we need to know where you sit with that. I know it's really hard for those that are passively seeking, because they might think, well, I've not really been thinking about job search seriously, so I've not actually thought about what it is that I'd want to see in my package. But I think it is crucial to know, firstly, what package you're currently on. What are all the all the little bits and pieces that are part of your package. Because sometimes when you think about it, there are aspects that we don't actually really, think about on a day-to-day basis, but it can be quite material when you move. So know what each item actually is in your total package, and then ask yourself, right, okay, if I had to give up any of this, would I be okay with it? And if you're not, then those are the must-haves in your asking package. Also think about sort of, what are your salary expectations? What have you heard in the market? What are we telling you as well? What makes financial sense to you in terms of, your ways of living? So this is a reason why we ask you about your expectations and why we do spend quite a bit of time on it as well. Just the fact that there are, also one thing I did want to raise as well, with a lot of these PE-backed practices, everyone's remuneration becomes more and more complicated as well. So these are the things to really think about ahead of time and to have a really candid conversation with us as well about it. Now, the next thing is notice period. I know we touched on this quite extensively in our previous webinar as well. But regards to notice period, I think make sure you go through your contract. Don't be surprised. I've had instances where candidates have come to me to say, I'm on 3 months notice, great. And then when it comes to resigning, HR will say to them, actually, you've been with our firm for 7-8 years. You now actually have to serve 6 months because of your longevity with the firm. So I always say to candidates, go through your contract, make sure that there's not going to be any surprises. Other things to also, whilst we're on the topic of contracts, look to see if there are actually any clawback clauses if you've just come back from maternity leave, or if you received a large bonus payout, etc. Or unlikely, I think, as a director, if there was any, study related clawback clauses. But if there are any clawback clauses, make make sure you are aware of what they are, what the implications are as well. And it's not going to come to you as a surprise when you actually do tender your resignation. One other thing also is understanding your non-compete or your non-solicit timeframes as well. Everyone will have something in place, but just make sure that you know what they are, because this will also potentially have an impact as to how you populate this business plan of yours. And then moving on to technical interview. So I'll say how to best prepare for a technical interview. As mentioned, each and every firm is very different. The approach that they have is very different depending on who your interviewer is as well. You have a very different experience. So I would say in most cases, there will be some form of a case study. Either it's presented to you ahead of the interview, or they might give it to you on the day. Now, if you are given the scenario ahead of time, I would say make sure you come well prepared. And how to best prepare for these sort of case studies is to really focus on, how are you actually demonstrating your commercial impact? Technical knowledge is important, but as a director, that commercial piece becomes more important. That's going to be one of the key focuses for your interviewers. So, for example, I would say to my candidates, highlight how you've maybe successfully advise clients on a really tax-effective, efficient strategy that maybe has resulted in significant cost savings or has increased profitability, or maybe discuss an instance where you've identified and mitigated a potential tax risk, and you protected your client's reputation and financial position. And also, in addition to that, I would say be able to also showcase your ability to lead and mentor a team, demonstrate how you drive performance, how you foster a culture of continuous improvement as well. Another thing to consider as well, I would say, is stay up to date on your tax legislations. It's constantly changing. We all know that. Don't be caught out. There might be more sector-specific updates. Look it up, I would say, because you may not necessarily be working on a client that's going to have an impact with any changes, but your interviewer may bring it up. So look it up, I would say. Now, also another one that we've had our candidates sort of, trip up on slightly is changes following a budget announcement. So I think particularly in the private client tax world, it's been quite a big shake-up in that side of things. So always understand what these, upcoming budget announcements are how it's going to impact the tax world, and be ready to talk about it. I do suggest candidates to be ready to kind of give their point of view, because you will be asked it. And, it is risky to kind of put a point across when things are still up in the air. But I would say being able to demonstrate a point and justifying it is actually is crucial. I think that there are quality skills that you're demonstrating as well. So don't forget about know what's happening in the market, pretty much. Let's move on to the panel interview. Now, this tends to be the most daunting part of the process. The reason being is that you're going to have a range of different stakeholders, senior stakeholders in the same room, with potentially quite different agendas. So the best way we prepare candidates for this stage of the interview process is to ensure that they have a good range of examples demonstrating, their ability to resolve conflict, demonstrating their team leadership skills, and also demonstrating their stakeholder management skills as well. And then moving on to the presentation and business plan stage, which I think most candidates also get quite nervous about. I would say to my candidates, be realistic with your business plan. Put something together that makes sense to you. It's your business plan. It's no one else's business plan. Really focus on growth strategy, what your team development plan may be based on all the information that you've received to date throughout the other interview processes, and also really demonstrate your knowledge of the market. Now, just touching on the Big Four, it tends to be a bit more emphasis on the actual numerical data and KPIs as well. So if it is the Big Four that you're going through the process with, be really mindful of it. Obviously, we will guide you as well. We always will go through our business plans with our candidates and see how we can actually add a bit more value as well. Whereas the likes of the mid-tier firms, they really focus on sort of, relatability, your commercial acumen, your ability to demonstrate, the fact that you've taken the lead with conversations with senior management as well. Now, let's move on to the final interview. So with regards to this, I think once you've got to the final interview, I think you've done pretty well, but don't take your foot off the pedal. Anything can happen. I would say for the final interview, which is usually conducted by the managing partner or someone from the senior management team. Be prepared to discuss your long-term vision, your career growth plans. Is partnership an option for you as well with the firm? And what's the legacy that you want to build? What's the mark that you want to make? Really show that you've demonstrated that you've researched the firm's values, and you understand what the leadership tone is as well. So yeah, so sorry, a lot of talking from me, but that pretty much sums up the different stages of the interview.
Yeah, I mean, like Claire's reiterated, we are here to help you through all of these stages. And I know it might sound quite overwhelming, especially if you've not gone for a tax director position before and this is your first time. Compared to the senior manager level, it's obviously a bit more intense. There's more stages, etc. Totally different things. So yeah, we're here to help and prepare you for every stage. But yeah, on to the next section. I think it's always useful to know who you can rely on within the processes. So it'll be useful if you can kind of run through who the key stakeholders are and the key participants.
Excellent, sure. So in terms of the tax director process, there will be a number of stakeholders that you'll be facing off with or dealing with or meeting. So starting with, the recruiter being us, we're here to kind of guide you through the process and really be your sounding board and someone to just keep pushing you, encouraging you as well. Obviously, there'll be the partners involved as well, which will look into your leadership qualities, your business acumen, your technical knowledge as well. HR business partners or others in the HR team, they will really, I've had candidates ask, what's the point of HR being involved in this process? And I'm thinking, well, there is a lot of reasons why. So, they really need to ensure that there is a good cultural and behavioral match and alignment as well to the firm. And then you have the managing partner or someone from senior leadership, and they'll be looking into your long-term fit and as well as your commercial alignment as well to the firm. And I think the most important sort of stakeholders that you will be meeting with are your peers, other directors already in the team. It's crucial. It's crucial for them to get to know you, to know if they can work well with you. And also, more importantly, I think for you to ensure that you can work with them, ensuring that there is that so-called right chemistry.
Yeah, no, that's really good outline there. I think it's really important to really understand your stakeholders at the end of the day. So yeah, thanks for that. Do you get a lot, and a lot is, I know, of course, confirms, but how long does the typical interview process usually take for a tax director role?
Sure. So we mentioned briefly how long the actual interview process itself takes, which, roughly about 2 to 3 months, which can be quite lengthy in comparison to a lot of the other interviews you've experienced, I would say, before a tax director role. So, just to reiterate, so the screening to final stage process takes probably about 6 to 8 weeks, and sometimes maybe up to 12 weeks if we're struggling to, work with all different schedules and all. And then following the interview process is the offer stage. Now, this can actually take up to a couple of weeks, depending on the firm that you're working with, the processes that needs to take place, etc. So Big Four processes often require multiple sign-offs. So I would always say to candidates and, anyone involved, always allow for extra time at that offer stage. Finishing off the final interview, don't expect that offer to be out to you in less than 2 weeks, I would say, based on our experience. They do surprise us sometimes, but I would say at least 2 weeks. Now, mid-tier firms can sometimes move faster depending on their internal processes, but that's also changing as well from what we've seen. Extra sign-offs, more stakeholders involved in that final approval process. And then once you've got through all the sign-off, you've got the offer out and all, you then need to, and you've accepted it, obviously, you probably have your conversations or you've accepted it, and you resign, which is another step of the process. You then need to serve your notice. Now, as mentioned earlier, that usually ranges between 3 to 6 months as a senior manager or the director. So all in all, from start to end, we're talking possibly 9 months actually before you can get your foot through the door. 6 to 9 months before you can get your foot through the door in your new role. So yeah, it's very lengthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth starting if you even think about it.
Agreed. Yeah,
it's worth starting now, to be honest.
Agreed.
But no, I completely agree with all of that, particularly on the Big Four processes taking longer. I know we've both had experience of some very lengthy processes just due to all the admin and all the background and everything. So yeah. Also want to just mention quickly when you are interviewing through periods like Easter and summer, where there's school
Mm,
holidays and bank holidays, obviously this can also delay processes. We
yes.
see
Oh
it
my
a lot
gosh.
on our side, yeah.
School
So
holidays you mentioned.
yeah,
Yeah.
and recruitment does slow down throughout school
Mm,
holidays, so be wary of that as well.
agreed.
No, another question I wanted to raise is what are some of the common challenges faced by candidates through tax direct interviews? I think it's really important that we kind of run through this.
Mm.
And do you have any suggestions on how you would overcome these?
So I'm just going to focus on the key ones. There are tons, but I really want to focus on, I think, the key ones where I feel my candidates have really faced hurdles over. So first one is the business plan. Reason being is that it's probably unlikely you've been asked to do a business plan in any other stages in your career until you kind of get to director. So one thing with business plans, some firms are quite, I think, generous, and they may give you someone to guide you and support you with the business plan from the business, so they can give you sort of an idea as to what's expected, what you need to include, and be able to sort of maybe give information that you wouldn't otherwise obtain from not working with someone with the firm already on it. I would say in other firms, they may not have those sort of resources for you. So regardless, I would say with the business plan, the most important thing is firstly, don't work on a fluffy business plan. Make sure you've got metrics, make sure you've got numbers, make sure you've got a clear direction as to what you want to be achieving, what you're trying to kind of get across as well to the audience. And also, you spent so much time to put your business plan together. The presentation piece then becomes crucial as well. And I will say, there's been instances where, I always go through my candidates' business plans in depth, so I know what they put in it. But for whatever reason, and there's always, I think a lot of it does come down to nerves as well. They're in the interview presenting it, and it just doesn't go to plan. So, biggest tip here. Firstly, know what's in your plan. Make sure there are clear objectives. Make sure there are, whatever you've committed to, there are actions to back up how you're going to achieve whatever your objectives are. Make sure there are metrics that you want to commit to, and make sure that you demonstrate good market knowledge. However, with that, once you've got that all in place, start practicing. Get in front of your family members, get in front of your friends, get in front of people you don't feel comfortable speaking to, just so you can become more familiar. You know what's actually in your business plan, because that part of it, when you're presenting, can actually really fail my candidates. So don't let that happen to you. Be more prepared than less. Also, one thing I did want to raise as well, you will be given a time frame as to, how much time you have, to prepare the business plan. If you need more time, it's absolutely fine. Just ask for it and say that, it might have been the fact that you've been very busy at work, which is usually the case, or something unexpected has come up. But you'd rather have that little bit more time and ask for that little bit more time than to feel that you've had to rush through it and not have given it your best foot, because you pretty much only get one chance. So, don't be afraid to ask for time. Obviously, you're using us anyway to ask for that extra time. So let us know. We will find a way to get you more time, but just don't be afraid to actually ask for it. Next thing I would say, which kind of is a bit of a pitfall candidates, would be, your reluctance to talk about money. So as mentioned in the initial screening process, where we sit down with you to understand, what are your motivators? What are you trying to achieve here? Money is a key thing. A lot of my candidates will be able to comfortably and easily confirm their current salary, some not, where they've got some pretty complex bonus plans in place or what have you. That's fine. But when it comes to asking about the expectations, they'll give me a blank answer, or they'll look at me blankly. Now, the thing is, it's really important, I think. Obviously, if you don't have the answer to begin with, that's fine, but really think about it. I think moving jobs, changing jobs, there's multiple reasons behind it, but obviously money does come into play with things. I think more so now with the economy being where it's at and the cost of living being where it's at, we have to be quite realistic with our expectations as well. So I say to candidates, don't be afraid, for particularly the fact you're working with a recruiter, be as honest as you can, be as transparent, be as candid as you can. I always say to candidates, give me a number. I don't care what it is. Don't worry about who might judge you, what have you. Just give me the ideal number and then we'll talk it through. So that's something that I really want candidates to be comfortable, be confident, and, be able to kind of really share what's going through their mind. What is it that they want to achieve? Are there any financial kind of, obligations that they have that we need to be aware of, whereby, if we do kind of actually, there is instances where you may have to take a pay cut. Not always, but there have been the odd ones. So things like that, understanding, right, if it was the case, how sustainable would it be? But if we talk about sort of, salary increments, which tends to be the case if it is a promotional promotional move, director salary ranges will come in between, depending on the size of the firm, between about 110 to 180. And then on top of that, you'll usually have bonuses, be it discretionary, be it company performance. Some firms don't have any bonuses, so make sure you ask the questions. We're pretty good with being very transparent about it as well. There might be car allowances involved, and pension. Pension is the key thing. I think a lot of my candidates do actually forget about the impact of the pension piece. As you become more senior, that part of your overall package can be quite material as well. So know what you're on from a pension perspective, but also know what, if it was. The thing is, each firm's pension schemes are very different. If there is a change, if it means that you're having to take a cut in your pension, make sure you know what that is and how it's actually going to impact you financially as well. Let's just actually, now as we're talking about money, let's also just briefly touch on counteroffers as well. One thing I do want to say is that we are seeing a bit more of this happening in the market, and that's counteroffers. It's always been an understanding that counteroffers, I always think, are risky to take. There is a huge, it will have a huge impact on the trust with your current firm. Obviously they might be throwing a lot at you to get you to stay, but the thing is, it's usually very short-lived. And then when you think about sort of, right, okay, as mentioned, from director, obviously partner is the next step, right? How will that impact you? Will they potentially put someone ahead of you because of the fact that, you have actually broken their trust by resigning? So really think about it and maybe question yourself, is it likely that I would actually want them to counter me? If it is, don't go through this process. I would say go and sit down with your managing partner or your partner and try and get that increment. Right. So also one more thing just about sort of, career progression, etc., from director to partner. Now, some candidates actually are afraid to actually ask this question, but I think it's quite important. So, and also at times when candidates don't ask these questions and it comes to the very end of the process and it comes to offer stage and there's all these other things that are coming into play. And then they realize that, I didn't actually ask, what's my future in this role, or, how likely is partnership, or it could be the fact that they assume that there is an opportunity to move into a partner role, but realistically speaking, the firm didn't really have that as part of their plan. So I would always say, ask that question. If you don't feel comfortable asking in an interview, use us, get us to ask the question, get us to clarify for you. But yes, anything you wanted to add to this, Chris, actually?
Yeah, I think firstly, circling back to your point about counteroffers, I think once one foot is out the door, the damage is kind of done, and the trust is at the end of the day is broken, and you need that trust in that relationship. So yeah, I totally agree with your point there. I did also want to add a point that I've seen personally, and I think you can quite easily fall into this trap of not being strategic enough, I would say. I think, yes, you are obviously, by that point, you're director, you should be technically sound and you do know your stuff. But I think at that level, you need to show your business acumen. It's so important. I think you need to be prepared to discuss things like cross-selling, pipeline development, and definitely team building. Your role obviously becomes less of a technical based role and more focused on assisting and really driving the growth of the business. I mean, covering transfer pricing, which is the area I cover, there's a lot of smaller teams out there who are just kind of starting to build up transfer pricing teams maybe 1 or 2 years in, as demand is kind of skyrocketing right now. So I actually had a candidate in quite recently for a director interview for a smaller team. They were expected to kind of build out this new team from scratch. And the partner was really, really focused on asking them to lay out their plan for the team, not just how they would go about recruiting these areas, but also why this person first, why this level, then what should we do next? So yeah, I think it's really, really important to have that business acumen for sure.
Agree. I think particularly with the larger firms and the big four, that business acumen piece is so crucial.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's pretty much all the questions I had. I think it'd be useful for you guys to get some real life examples or case studies of successful tax director interviews. So if you wouldn't mind sharing these, Claire.
Absolutely, of course. So let me run through some examples across different, different sizes of firms. But Chris, I'll let you pop off for a little bit, and you can come back to join us again when it gets to Q&A. So thanks so much, Chris. So let's start off with firstly one of the a Big Four process I've taken my candidates through. We started with initial screening. So in addition to us meeting the candidate, HR also got involved as the recruitment team also did a quick screening as well, and with the candidate just to discuss their background and why they were interested in the firm and also the role. Then came the first round interview. That was a very technical interview, technically focused interview, where they had two partners from the tax team. The focus of that interview was more so around their experience and the nature of the clients that they worked on. They were also asked to give examples of quite complex work that they've been involved in. They also focused a bit on leadership as well as teamwork, and then were asked to give examples of any leading key projects that they've worked on. Then came the second round interview. Now, this was built around a case study. So during the case study, they were asked to, I think in this one, to develop a tax strategy for a multinational client. They were also asked to analyze a complex tax scenario and then present their solution. And then in the third round, they got to meet with some senior partners to discuss their fit within the firm as well as their long-term goals. They were asked questions such as, what is your vision for the tax department, tax team over the next 5 years? Discuss sort of successful wins. And then they went through more of a mini business plan in this example. So it wasn't anything overly strenuous. And then another example I had was the top 10 practice. So the first round, so we did the screening for them effectively and it went straight to partner interview. So they broke down the first interview into two sections. So we had competency-based questions and then technical questions. In terms of the competency-based questions, they were more focused on specific skills and experiences that they've had. A question that my candidate was asked was, how do you develop tax strategies that align with the client's business objectives? Very open and wide question. And then another question that they had was around, or actually I get this, I've heard quite frequently that this question is asked, around how do you handle difficult clients or situations where there is a disagreement on tax strategies? So having an example ready to go is quite useful in that scenario. And then my candidate was asked to give an example of a technical case that they worked on. I think in that one, they spoke about the implications of recent changes in UK tax legislation on corporate tax planning. So I think, in that interview, they were asked all sorts of questions in different ways as well. And then onto the second round of interview, it was more a case study focus as well. The candidate was asked to write a memo presenting or outlining sort of a new and efficient tax strategy for the client's group of businesses in preparation for the acquisition of a new entity into the business. So the candidate was asked to present their findings in the interview, and then during the interview, they were asked further questions around, what they presented. And then the third round, it was a panel interview. They had 3 key partners in the interview alongside HR, and they were there to discuss the candidate's strategic vision as well as leadership style, and also to present their business case as well. And then in the fourth interview, they were asked to meet with 2 other directors in the team so they could get to know the team better, as well as ensure that they could work collaboratively. My candidate also got to ask some pretty candid questions around, how they work, the nature of the work, etc., that they didn't really get the chance to ask earlier in the interview process. And then the final interview was with the managing partner as well. And then the third example that I had was with a boutique practice. In the first round of interviews, it started more as an informal discussion, really, with 2 of the partners of the business. So my candidate could understand more about the company and also the role that they were interviewing for. And then the candidate was given an opportunity to share their experiences and also explain reasons, the motivations behind exploring new opportunities. From the first interview and the second round, it was more of a technical and behavioral focused interview. I think one of the examples of the technical questions that were asked in the interview was how do you stay updated with changes in tax legislation? And then the behavioral question that was asked, one of the behavioral questions that were asked was, can you give an example of a strategic tax decision that you made which benefited the company? And then in the third round, my candidate was given a case study around a complex tax issue, and then asked around how they would handle the situation. I think it was the client was facing a significant tax penalty because of a non-compliance, and they were asked to present a solution. And then They were asked in the fourth round to come up with and present a comprehensive business case. Now, this one was pretty strenuous in the sense that it went into so much details. We were compiling a cash flow statement on a month by month basis. Not something that I've actually seen before, but we got there in the end. I wasn't quite expecting it, to be honest, with the boutique practice, but they were very detailed, understanding what the projected revenue targets were, really detailing the strategies, where were the clients going to come from, etc. And also the approach that they were going to take to build out and expand their client base, what sort of tools they would need, all that sort of fun stuff. And also the presentation, they were asked to cover sort of, a key aspect around the market analysis, what the sales tactics would be, what the long-term growth plans would be as well. In addition to that, they also had to demonstrate sort of their understanding of how competitive the landscape was, who were the other players in the same market, and how they were going to win clients over the competitors. So that was pretty intense, I must say. And once they got through the business plan, they then finished up with the final interview with the same partners that they met in the first round. And yeah, so that kind of concludes examples that I wanted to share. Obviously, it was quite hard for me to summarize it because we're talking about a process that took place over a few months. But I just wanted to sort of showcase a few of the kind of key things that were brought up in the interviews and sort of the format of those interviews as well. Now, what I wanted to do is firstly just to summarize some of the key points we covered today and then be able to move on to our Q&A. Excellent. So just to summarize, key takeaways from today would be firstly, understand the firm that you're interviewing at and tailor your strategy accordingly. Balance your technical knowledge and your credibility around with your commercial acumen and your market knowledge as well. Prepare well for the business plan presentation stage. As mentioned, this is where most candidates will either succeed and do phenomenally well or, they will fall quite short of. And lastly, I would say, remain engaged consistently and ensure that you're professionals throughout the interview process. I think it is, it is a very long process. We're talking months, there's multiple stages. Sometimes candidates can become a bit complacent, a bit too comfortable, and they do take their foot off the pedal a little. But you have to remember that you're meeting with different stakeholders throughout the process. And, it's pretty much first impressions last. So you're trying to put your best foot forward. So until, the offer's on the table, you signed and is all final and is definitely in the bag, I would say just ensure that, you're always with that sort of mindset that I have to put my best foot forward. I have to really prove myself. I need to remain professional. Right, so that's pretty much it. Now for the Q&A section, and welcome back, Chris.
Hi, everyone. But no, please do feel free to drop any questions you have into the chat box, or please do email them across to us if you'd like us to ask, or if you'd like to ask directly to us at a later stage. So the first question that we have is, okay, can you give us some examples of how to demonstrate good leadership, team leadership, and stakeholder management?
All right. Should I take this one, Chris? I can follow on from what I mentioned earlier. Right. So actually for team, a good question, really, because I didn't really want to spend too much time on it in case it might not have been of interest to many. In terms of team leadership, I would say focus on examples where you've demonstrated, you maybe led by example, or you've inspired or motivated the team through, your actions or decisions that you've made, or you've demonstrated really strong work ethics and integrity, and, or you've demonstrated that you've really committed to working to high standards at all times. And then you end up really setting an example for the team to follow. That's more organic leadership, I would say. Other things that you can maybe give examples of times where you provided mentorship, or you've kind of really fostered a collaborative working environment, and you made a real effort to recognize and celebrate the contributions of your team members. I think that that's really important nowadays, particularly in the different generations that we're working with. Recognition is key. I think those are probably a couple of good examples to think about, or to try and see if you've got any to be able to demonstrate actually having strong team leadership. On the stakeholder management side, I would say examples that you could maybe give is around how proactive you are in your communication with senior stakeholders. Small things, for example, are you someone who regularly updates the partners that you're working with on where you are with certain complex and key clients, or the progress of the team, and giving reassurance that work actually will be delivered on time. Other ways to demonstrate, good stakeholder management is maybe giving examples of where you've established really open lines of communications, and you've always been very transparent about challenges and decisions that you've had to make. The reason why I say this will help to build or give your interviewers confidence that, you are someone that can be trusted. You are someone that focuses on sort of fostering a collaborative relationship, and you are someone that partners can just leave to it and know that if there is a problem, there is an issue, you're going to raise it, and not sort of leave it to the last minute where maybe it's a bit too late. Right. Okay. So that's all I have to say for that. Now, next question. What have we got here? What a good post-interview etiquette? What is good post-interview etiquette? Should we say thank you? Oh, okay, that's a good one. Should I start that one off, Chris? And did you want to add to it? Yeah. So this is a good question. In terms of sending, say, maybe a thank you email, particularly, I think candidates at the director level, maybe those in this upcoming generation might think it's a bit old school, but I personally think it's such a great idea, and it gives you an opportunity to really sort of engage with your interviewers again after the interview, and it just helps to demonstrate that you're really keen and you're committed. Also, I'll say just mention something specific about the discussion that you had that demonstrate that you were really engaged. Other things that I would say just quickly is always ask for constructive feedback. And another thing, just a minor one, I would say, but if you can always kind of after you've given feedback to your recruiters, maybe just to let them know sort of your availability, or first your interest in the role if you want to continue with it, and then your availability. For example, if you happen to have holidays up and coming, or you've got something at work which will mean that you can't interview for another couple of weeks or what have you, let them know ahead of time, and then ask about the next steps with your recruiter.
I totally agree with all these points, Claire. I think firstly, on the thank you email, I think it's going to make you stand out, because guarantee you, probably no one else has done that in the process.
Agreed.
So
yeah, we're trying to bring it back to being the cool norm thing to do now.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're going to be like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing anything to make you stand out against the competition. And particularly about the constructive feedback thing, I think this is something we're always looking for from our clients. Some are naturally better than others at providing this.
Agreed. Yeah. We've got those one-worded answers before, haven't we?
Yeah, it's just like yes, no. And again, like that's what we do. We're here to help push for this feedback, and it's really important for you guys to get this feedback to help for the rest of the process. On the flip side of that, it's also really important for our clients to get feedback after their interviews. We'll always have a conversation once you've completed each interview to ask how it went and really identify what went well, what could be improved, etc. And clients are always taking on this constructive feedback. One example that I just want to bring up quickly was my colleague Tasneema. She had candidates who went through initial HR screening interviews, which weren't really a necessary step and were very time consuming. And kind of, like I said, added an unnecessary step into an already extensive process. So we gave that feedback on board that our candidates had told us about this process, and the client really took this on board and they really listened to us. And since then have amended this, and now they don't have to do that stage. So they do really listen to our feedback. So please do provide any if there is any. So yeah, that's what I've got to add on to that. We do have another question, just time for one more, I think. But yeah, who should be the one negotiating salary? This is an interesting one, actually. We'll go into more depth on this in our next episode, but the short answer to that is us as your recruiters. So bringing it back to the earlier part of the webinar where we kind of emphasize the importance of being as transparent as possible with us as your recruiters on your current and expected package, I think is really crucial, so we can ensure that you are positioned in the best possible way from the get-go. I think when it comes to salary negotiations, having someone else to advocate on your behalf can be incredibly effective and really, really useful. And as market experts, we understand all the nuances of what to ask for and how much to push for. Like we know how the kind of the bandings that each firm will pay, and we are there to kind of guide you into the right areas to get you the best possible package. And I think if you go it alone, you might not have anyone backing you up, or you may not know the best ways to negotiate, or you may not know the market rates, you may not know what the specific firm is offering. So this can also put you in a disadvantage and result in you maybe not securing the optimal package or what you're looking for, or even worse, coming across as unreasonable, because if you don't know the market rate and you're asking for some crazy salary, they're not going to take it well. So yeah.
Thank you so much for the insight, Chris. It's so true. I think particularly around the salary negotiation side of things, I always say to candidates, leave it with us, the experts.
Yeah.
You just don't know what's going to be asked as well in the interview, and it's just really
Mhm.
awkward sometimes. You feel that you're slightly pinned down as such to have to commit to a number which you weren't really ready to commit to. So I always say to candidates, actually, we should probably talk about this, Chris. What do you say if
Yeah.
if your
Mm.
interviewer is asking you, so what's your expected salary? I always say, what I always say to my candidates is, let them know that right now your focus is actually on the opportunity itself. You can feel free to confirm your current salary, but in terms of your expected salary, say, well, let me have a think about it. Obviously, looking for market rate. I'll have a chat with my recruiter and I'll let them come back to you. So that's
Yeah.
usually my go-to line. But
I
Christine,
yeah.
say anything?
I do the same, I would say. But I would say it's something that doesn't tend to be brought up as much in interviews. But I
Mm,
think we obviously want to prepare you in case it does come
mm,
up. I know HR maybe ask it a bit more
yeah,
than if
you're
you're
right.
having an interview with a partner, for example. So do be prepared. But yeah, exactly the same as what Claire said. I think really focus and take the topic back to the opportunity rather than the salary, and we deal with that. That's our job.
Mm,
So leave it to us.
fantastic. So thank you so much for everyone's time today. And we hope you enjoyed it. Now we really look forward to seeing you in episode 4 of Ambition Talks Tax Careers, where we will be discussing in details about offer negotiation.
Yeah. And of course, any questions that we haven't managed to answer, please feel free to email them to us directly and we will get back to you. Thank you, everyone, for
See
joining.
you later.